Okay, it's 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and we're going to get started. So welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. My name is Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. I'm pleased to be joined, as I am almost every week, by Dion McCormick, no relation, who's our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha. Dion will be showing you, demonstrating some stuff for you today, but more importantly, he will be asking your questions. So that brings me to the first of 2 points I'd like to bring up. First is that you can ask questions at any time. We strongly encourage it. Go ahead, type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface, and we will get to those. Your questions are what make these sessions interesting and informative to other people, so please do not be shy. The second thing is that this session will be recorded. You can find recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. Also, at the end, I'm going to show you actually a better place to find the webinar recordings, but I just want to let you know that they're there. And so let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. You should see a dialog box there, Dion.
There we go. Let me know when it comes through.
And I can see your screen now.
Good, good. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate that. My name is Dion McCormick, and I am the lead solutions engineer for Alpha Anywhere. So help new people bring on board and also experience and scope and projects and lots of fun. And these days, it is crazy busy. I just wanted to touch on real quick is I'm going to today continue my presentation from last week, which was at the Developers Conference. And after we go through that, I'll do a quick recap, go through some little dog and ponies, actually show you the code, and then we'll get into our Q&A section. And we really appreciate everybody taking the time to send us questions. It really helps us understand what people are looking for and how we can help them. Wanted to kind of do a quick follow-up. We had our Developers Conference 2 weeks ago, and the response has just been fantastic. And if you get a chance, and this is really critical, take the time to go to the Alpha Software the video section, and on there is a great video on the roadmap, and this will kind of, it's done by Selwyn, who's the lead developer. It talks about where the technology is going, the new pieces that are in place that are going to be deployed very soon, specifically the tablet-oriented products. It's very exciting stuff, and I think if you spend a little bit of time watching that, you'll kind of see where the company's going. But what we're seeing from the Developers Conference is just this overwhelming response to the direction the company is going in. Specifically, we have gotten new projects that are coming online, new things coming in. People are very enthusiastic. They see how the product's going to help them solve a lot of very critical problems. And what's very interesting, too, is we're seeing a huge amount of interest from much larger companies. And it's very gratifying because it's really a powerful tool that can be used in the enterprise space, which for us is gratifying as a company to see our tool in those kind of large companies. But also very important is that it opens up a lot of opportunities for our developers, many who are online today, in terms of their engagement with Alpha and using the tool to do bigger, better, and more improved and incredible projects. So take the time, go check out that roadmap presentation. It's very educational. I watched it again because I honestly couldn't capture everything that was said during the conference. There was so much data, and this allows me to go back and kind of refresh and really make sure I understand all the pieces, where they're going, what's happening there. And so wonderful event. Dave, thank you for your instrumental actions in helping get that set up and having a great success in that presentation and in that event.
Thank you, Dion. We do actually have a question asking about where are the slides, and we have not posted them yet. I've just gathered them. I've just sent them over to our web guy. He's working on posting them. Anyone who attended the webinar is going to get and probably other people as well, are going to get a link to that where you can download the PowerPoint slides. So we do have the first one is posted already for the roadmap, but we have the one on .NET, for example. We have a bunch of the other ones as well, and more are going to be added all the time. We also plan to get some of the video, probably not all of the video, but some of the video also posted on that page. So look for an email. It hasn't come out yet, but give us a day or two, but we should have all those materials assembled. It turned to be a lot of work assembling these materials. I didn't think I quite appreciated the scope of it. So, but anyway, it'll be up there soon.
We're talking about 3 full days of presentations and engagements, and it was pretty overwhelming to be there in terms of just being able to assimilate all that. So I really do personally, just from my standpoint, I appreciate what Dave and his team does to encapsulate and put that on. In fact, on here, you'll see there's a 2014 recap because it allows you to go back and digest it all. And it was a pretty amazing event. And again, the response has been overwhelming. So take the time to check those pieces out. And I guarantee you'll find some stuff in there you're like, oh, new business opportunity. If I had that feature in there, I could go after a whole new clientele or go after improving existing solutions, and it'll get your juices going.
Excellent.
Yeah. Hey, oh, Jinx, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. I mean, Dr. Pepper. Okay. So what I'd like to do first is we're going to get to our Q&A section, but what I want to do is continue my presentation from last week, which was called Card Tricks. And so let me go ahead and bring that up. And let me make sure everything's coming okay. Cool. So we'll go ahead and put that up there. You know, the agenda of this presentation, I'm going to do a quick refresh and then dig into the next step, is about panels and the ability to use the panel technology to give your mobile applications and desktop applications a really native-like experience. And the team at Alpha has been working very, very hard to optimize the libraries, the other things that are used on the mobile device. And it's amazing, in the last 6 months, the speed and responsiveness of the interface has improved and improved, meaning they haven't had any new technology. The tablet stuff's just coming online now. But a lot of work has been done under the covers to look at how they can optimize what is running on the mobile platform to reduce footprint, speed up everything, and we're seeing dramatic increases in speed, which again gives you more of a native experience. And so what I want to talk about today is how you use dock panels to really achieve that incredible result of what we see in a lot of mobile platforms, these kind of behaviors here. And I'm going to actually walk you through the code there. But as a quick refresher, we have two types of panels. Well, there's one type of panel, but there's two types of controllers. One is called a panel layout and a panel navigator. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So if you want, online is last week's presentation where I take a little bit more time on these slides. So feel free to, after today, if I went by something too quick, jump back and watch that. And again, this will be online another day or so. So a panel layout is the ability to display multiple panels displayed on the screen at one time, although a real big caveat, which we'll talk about, is some may be hidden. A panel navigator is a different animal. The idea of panel navigators, this is really your mobile device, is that you're displaying one panel at a time and swapping things in and out. So this is an example of a couple panel layouts. You'll see the red part is the panel layout. The blue part is the panel cards. And you'll notice when it's displayed either in a left to right fashion on the left side of the screen or top to bottom on the right side of the screen, you'll notice that all the panels are being shown at one time. So instead of just showing one panel card, you're seeing multiple panel cards on the screen at one time. Now the panel navigator, again, is optimized for a different behavior. And that idea is that you have one piece of content, i.e. one panel card, on the screen at one time, and you're shifting these cards in and out of view based on the needs of the application and how the user is interacting with it. And all of these behaviors can be controlled either by the user, you can give them control over what's being displayed on the screen, or you can do it programmatically, meaning that you can control through button clicks and through activities, or who knows, many different techniques, what is shown on the screen at one time. Okay. So the neat thing is you can mix and match them. You are not limited to just one. So in the case you see, we have at the top level a panel layout with a panel card, but also embedded in that top level panel layout is another panel layout. And then if you go in there, you'll see inside that is a panel card, but also embedded in there is a panel navigator. So what's really cool is you can create very sophisticated user interfaces by using a mix and match of these different technologies. So don't think you just have to pick one. You can use multiple of these in one place to achieve the result of what you want your user interface to look like, behave, etc. in front of the client. Okay. Now, the real key and what I want to get into now is the secret sauce for creating that native kind of look and feel. And that's the concept of docked panels. And with docked panels, you have someone similar to a panel navigator, but the idea is you've already laid out your panels, i.e. I have a panel layout left to right. And you'll notice in this case, I have two panel cards that are in that panel layout. But I've done something interesting. I've set panel card number 1 to be docked. And that docked means that it's hidden. It could be displayed at opening, but in this case, it's a special type of behavior where in this case, I've set it to be invisible. And then what you can do is you can then, through either user interaction or a command, bring that panel card into view on the screen. And you can do it one of two ways. Actually, there's three ways to do it. Method number one is you bring the panel card on and overlay the panel card that's already on the screen. And that you see on the left-hand side where kind of panel card 1 is consuming about 30-40% of panel card 2. The other method, which is shown on the right, is when you bring the panel card out, you actually push the existing panel card over. And that's really powerful when you have some very critical information that you want to be able to have the user still see in panel card number 2. So panel card number 1 is going to obscure what is below it, so that may be good or bad. Most menu systems, which I'll demonstrate today, use that method because in the menu, you're not really caring about what's underneath it, you're caring about what's in the menu. But you may have an action panel where you're saying, okay, I'm looking at a record or a picture, and I want to take an action on that. So I'm going to show this menu by showing panel card number 1, but I want to make sure I don't obscure for the user while they're selecting that action the content below in panel card number 2. And so you can mix and match, you can kind of play with these, pick the right one for that experience you want to give your user at that time. So let me go ahead and do a demonstration. So that's kind of a quick recap from last week. Again, if I missed anything, we go through in more detail. Okay, I'm in the alpha development environment. And for people who are new to alpha, this is our standard. I'll walk through that in a few moments there. But first, I always like to check, Dave, process check, sound, video coming through okay?
Yep, okay.
Okay, good. Don't want to have people out there going, what happened there? Okay, so in this, you'll notice that we have our UX builder. So I'm building a UX, which is our form technology. On the left-hand side, we have a set of different controls. In the middle, we have the layout of that. And in the right-hand side, we have the properties that are associated with each of these controls. And for people who are new, I just want to let you know that one of the most powerful things, yet the most challenging things for alpha, is the sheer amount of options you have to tailor your application. So every component, everything in your system, like if I click a button right here, you'll notice that I have a huge amount of potential options that I have in my hands to be able to modify the behaviors of it. So just give yourself time. A lot of what we find when people who are getting new is just kind of getting familiar with what's important, what's not, and kind of getting their way around the system. Once they know it, they appreciate the fact that they have essentially a way to modify every little element of the application and how it runs. And we expose all that because we never want you to run into a limitation where you can't achieve what you want to achieve with your mobile device. So I'm going to focus here in the middle, and this is our layout. So you'll notice at the top level, I have something called the panel layout. So that is the major component that holds the panels below it. And you'll notice there's a opening and a closing tag. So everything from here to here is within that panel layout. Now, let's walk through the content of what's in the panel layout. So first, we have this one thing called a panel header. And that's a special type of panel. And the cool thing about that is that as it kind of denotes being a header, it will always be kind of stuck at the top of the screen. And so think of it as your kind of header on a mobile app on the top. And down below we have you can also have things called panel footers. And in here we have panel card number 1. And notice I've called it panel card hidden. I'll explain that in a minute. Then I have panel card number 2. And I actually also have a panel card number 3. So I have 3 panel cards that are in here that are available there. So let me go ahead and run this and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Won't have the gotchas from last week there. Okay. So now you're going to see my panel running, and I'm using a UX component in a mobile environment. So I'm simulating there. So you'll notice that on the screen right here, I have a header here. That's that header section up top. To the left, we have panel card number 2 and panel card number 3. But you'll notice something. I had 3 panel cards on there. Where's the first one? It's hidden, and that's the concept of a docked panel. And what I can now do is programmatically make that panel appear like magic. So I'm going to click menu, and you'll notice something happened. Panel card number 1, which was hidden by the system, comes out and overlays panel card number 2. So I'm going to click here. You'll notice that I've still got panel card number 2 out there. But when I click panel card number 1, it comes out, etc. And the idea also is when I click any of the items within here, it can take an action and automatically hide that panel card or redock that panel card, and therefore. And that's you look at any app out there, and in fact, let me go back in here real quick. I'm going to go to this button menu, and I'm going to go to the button layout for that, and this is kind of an idea of how I can change anything. I'm going to change that to be an image only, and I'm going to go into image name. I'm going to click a CSS icon, and what it is that I have built in, I can either use built-in images or PNGs, or I can use a icon font, which is very easy. And then let's see if I have it here. I'm going to select the bar icon, which you guys will probably be very familiar with. Click OK. So now this may look a little bit more familiar to everybody. You've got your little bar icon up in the left-hand corner, and when you do that, it opens up the menu to be able to navigate or take action or do things like that. So as you can see, you can tailor your interface to give it more and more of a native experience. And these are kind of buttons, but these could be straight images. They could be CSS animations. It's crazy what you can do there. Okay, so let me tell you how I achieved this result. So let me go back into that. So we have our panel layout. That is think of it as the traffic cop that controls all the panels. We've got our panel header, and in our panel header, you noticed we had the menu where I added the little stacked bars, and I had a second bar. And this will always be at the top of my window. And notice these are all what are considered responsive. So if I were to flip the orientation or put it on a larger screen, these will all kind of expand to look good on the screen. Now, very important is I've got panel card number 1 here called hidden. And I actually called it hidden because when you get into this, you may have a bunch of panel cards. You want to name them so that you can stay organized as you go through the process. And in here is all we have in here is a list. And if I open up that list, and I preview it, that list is just rendering our menu here. And so we're using a CSS icon and a little piece of text. And so this list is actually there. Now the cool thing is this list could actually be dynamically loaded from a database, from a local data store, from a web API call. I mean, the sky's the limit. It's very, very powerful. But I want to just kind of give it some stacked data so I had something when it popped out to it. So I have these menu. And each of these menu items in the list control, you can attach a behavior to say navigate to a page, to hide a panel, to refresh something, to load it. It's up to you. But for now, this is just a simple static data list that shows those icons there. Now, notice that panel card number 1 is hidden, but I'm going to come back and show you how that is in a moment. Now we have panel card number 2 with just a little piece of text there, and panel card number 3 where we also have some piece of text there and something else I'll show you in a moment. So when we run it, you'll notice that panel card number 2 and panel number 3 are shown to the user, but panel card number 1 is hidden, even though it shows on this screen here. And there's a reason for that. And the way I do that is the following, is that let's go back and look at panel card number 2. If we go over in the properties section, so you click, we're on panel card number 2, and you'll notice in the panel size and dock options, none of these settings are set. Same thing for panel card number 3, none of these things are set. So therefore, I've not set any layout sizes or anything like that. I've just set them open there so that when this is displayed, you'll notice that since I've done that, it is basically evenly capturing the screen. So it's divided the screen and said, okay, you take half the screen, panel card number 2, I'll take the other half, panel number 3. And you could alter these as you need them and as you see fit. But if we go to panel card number 1 and we look at the panel layout and size, you'll notice something. The dock setting has been set to collapse before. The layout setting has also been set. So the way you hide or make a panel card docked is by using these settings right here. And that's all you have to do. So if I were to go ahead and just say, I'm going to go ahead and say none and get rid of this, okay, I'm going to save it. Let's look and see what the interface looks like now. Aha, panel card number 1, number 2, and number 3. So it said in that situation, oh, you don't want it docked? Okay, no problem. I'll negotiate with panel card number 2 and number 3, and I'll give you a third of the screen real estate for the user to see, but I won't dock that. And in fact, notice if I go to a vertical orientation, notice what happens. It automatically resizes everything, and that's the concept of responsive design. So the neat thing about it is I don't have to write a whole bunch of code. I don't have to do a lot of multiple layouts to get everything to look right. The system is going to do a lot of that for me, which is very powerful from there. By the way, we don't have the iPhone 6s or 6s Plus in there, so just everybody be patient. We'll get those in there, although I think they're pretty much the same. But anyway, that goes from there. So I'll go back to iPhone 5 horizontal. Let's go back in here. Let's select panel card number 1. I'm going to select the docking to be collapsed before, and very important is I have to give it a minimum size. If I don't give them a minimum size, it won't show up properly, because it needs to know when I show this panel card, how much space do you want to take? And I can show you that. So I'm going to set this up to be 100 pixels and collapse before. So I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to go into my working preview. I'm going to click the button here, and you'll notice it's a little tighter now. Then I can go back in here and set this to say, let's say 125. Yep. Save that and go into working preview. And sure enough, takes up a little more space, gives me a little more breathing room. So you can adjust that and play with that and do things along those lines. You have complete control over that there. Okay, so we know now how to create a docked panel card and how to make sure that it is hidden by merely adjusting the panel size and the layout options here. Now we get into the real magic. The question is, okay, well, I have this button here called Menu. If I click that menu, I want to show this panel card, the hidden panel card. So you may think off the top, and again, this is how I thought. I go, fine, I've got a button. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to go to the click event, and on the click event, I'm going to tell it to show that panel. And for people who are new to Alpha again, each of these elements have a set of JavaScript behaviors that you can tie into to add action JavaScript to actually make behaviors occur. But in this case, you'll notice something. The click event is empty. Wait a minute, that button, what is it doing? How is it doing? So that's a little confusing for people. And the reason why is that the showing and hiding of panel layouts is not managed by the buttons, but is managed by the panel layout control itself. So let's go ahead and go to the panel layout control. You'll notice over here, there's a setting. It's about 10 items down called Docked Panel Controller Buttons. So instead of setting behaviors on buttons to control panels, we go to the panel layout and tell it how to wire the things up from that standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this. You'll notice in here I have a button in here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how it is. So the idea behind this is I want to tell the panel layout how to control this hidden docked panel. So I'm going to add a button controller by clicking Add Button Controller. First thing it's asking me is, what is my button ID? In this case, it's called Button 1, and that's why you should also name your buttons. But it's this button right here, this button menu. And then the other thing it's asking me is, well, what panel ID does that button control? And sure enough, I want it to control panel card hidden 1. So what I'm doing is basically wiring up this button to this panel card by setting that at the controller buttons. And boom, there you go. So I click OK, go into my working preview or into my live preview. I click this, boom, now I'm wired up. And you'll notice I didn't actually add any code to this button. I did it to the whole panel layout there. And that's important because it actually makes it very easy to manage these behaviors, because you may have 2 or 3 different buttons on your screen managing that, that controller or that layout, that docked layout. You may be showing it at different times using different methods. Instead of having to go in and put in Action JavaScript on every button, you now have a central location that knows how to manage those layouts, so it's really handy there. And you're not limited to one button. You could have multiple buttons controlling multiple docked panels. So I could have 2, 3, 4, any number of docked panels. I could have any number of buttons or graphics, and then I could connect all those together in here to achieve the results I want. So the tricky parts are, first, number 1 is when you want to have a docked panel, you have to go to the panel size and dock options, set the dock and the minimum size, and you will be good to go. And that will tell the panel layout component that this panel card is now a dockable panel. The other thing you'll want to do is in the panel layout itself, go to the dock panel controller buttons and make sure to edit and modify those the panel layouts, or I'm sorry, to wire up the buttons to the panel layouts or panel cards. So that's the second kind of trick. It's kind of a two-step process that you go through from there. So that's all you need to do, and once you have that, you now have a native kind of menu behavior, and it will take care of, once this list is selected, deselecting that, and all those pieces there. Now I want to show you one last little trick, and then we'll get into the Q&A. As I said before, you'll notice the behavior of this is when I click on there, it's bringing that panel card out and overlaying the content below it. So that's usually the normal way that a menu would work on a mobile phone. But we have control over that. We can go to the panel layout here, and you'll notice we had our dock panel control buttons, but you'll notice here we have docked panel display method. In here we have over, slide, and push. So let me go ahead and just change that from over to slide. And then let's save this, go into my working preview, and let's watch what happens here. Check it out. Pretty cool. It's actually a very slick effect. So you'll notice instead of overlaying panel card number 2, it pushed or slid these to the side, and therefore what happens is you can now still see all the content in panel card while making your selection. Now for a regular kind of navigation menu, that's not a big deal. But again, if you have content in here that you're going to take an action, so this is like an action button, say, let's say you had a record of information, you wanted to email it, edit it, delete it, or something like that, you could use this method to kind of slide it, edit it, and then once you're done, redisplay what is available from there. Pretty cool technique. And then there's another one here called push, and it's a very subtle difference. But when I go in and do push, watch what happens. Looks the same, but underneath there's a few little subtleties on how it's actually managing those pieces there. And actually, if you go on to Alpha's website, there's a much more detailed explanation of the difference between slide and push. There's just certain situations where you need one over the other one. So that is where I want to go ahead and stop this week. I did the refresher. I showed you we have a panel layout. We have 3 panels. Panel card number 1 is a hidden one, so therefore I'm going to set the docking parameter and the panel size and dock options. I'm going to set the minimum size to be that. The next thing I'm going to do is once I've set up my hidden dock panel, I need to go to my panel layout, go to my docked panel control buttons, add buttons in there that wire the button ID to the panel. Thus now it is wired up so when you click on that button, the panel layout knows what to do on that panel. And last but not least is go to the docked panel display method and show push. And that will allow you, or not push, I'm sorry, most likely you'll use over, but you can select one of those there. And there's a whole bunch of other options. I won't go into now, but there's the animation style, there's duration, you can also adjust like the direction things pop out to. You also have, and this is a more detailed discussion, is that when we go to the panel card here, you'll notice that there are different types of docking behaviors. And these are really just kind of a trial and error to kind of play with it. All you have to do is set it, run it, watch what happens until you find one. Collapse before is most likely the one you'll use the most of the time. But there are other ones you can actually use which are pretty cool to give you different effects within the system there. So again, at that point, I'm going to go ahead and hold up. That is, let's see, where it is it? Yep, let me go ahead and show this here. So we've shown panel refresher. We went through the dock panels. I showed you kind of how to build that. If I went through too quickly on something, go on to the website in a day or so, and this presentation will be there, and you can literally kind of walk through it and set everything up and go from there. That's a built-in example. Next week, I want to spend about 10 minutes just talking about how you can use layout structures to mimic desktop web interfaces. And that was the last part of my presentation, kind of talking about, we kind of focused on mobile, but panel layouts and panels are extremely powerful when you start looking at laying out high-density screens on mobile on desktop web environments, and I really want to show you a little bit of that next week, but I don't want to consume any more time from this week. So with that, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Dave, and we can get to our questions and hopefully answers.
Great. Well, let's start with the one that we got first. Someone emailed us at least an hour before the webinar started. Always a good idea. This one is from Andy, and he has a question. He's building a mobile app, and so he's got a UX component, and he's created a button that's called Done. Now, when he presses that button, what he'd like to have happen is he'd like the current date and time to be inserted into a text box that he calls completed date and time.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, we'll go ahead and let's use our existing one here.
Great.
So I'm going to go into panel card number 2, and what I want to do is I'm going to put in 2 things, a text box. I'll just call it text box, Mr. Exciting here. And I'm going to add a button right here. Under other controls, I'm going to add a button. And let me go ahead and just leave panel card number 2. Okay, so I have a text box and a button. And I'm going to go ahead and click on here and say done. Okay, so let's go ahead and look and see what that looks like now. Nothing exciting, but I've got this done thing right here, and this text box is right here. So what I want to do is when I click this button, I want to modify the contents of the text box. So how I would do that is first I go to the button, I scroll down to the JavaScript actions area, and you'll notice on here there's a action called click. And that could be the same thing as press with your fingertip on a mobile device. So I click there. I add, just for people who are new, I'm going to cover this real quickly, but you have a whole series of different action JavaScript items to show message boxes, to do reporting, mapping, interfacing with the backend with AJAX callbacks, all those kind of things here. But for easy, what I'm going to do is go in here. I can also click up here and select text mode. Okay, so I have action JavaScript, which are sort of pre-canned point-and-click actions. But I also have in here text mode, which now this is merely a JavaScript editor. So I can actually go in here and type a little piece of JavaScript. Now, I don't want you to freak out. You don't have to do this a lot. And in fact, I'm going to show you in a few moments how powerful this thing is. You'll notice it has color highlighting, etc. It's really a nice JavaScript editor, because the reality is that all behaviors on the desktop web and the mobile device are JavaScript. So if we were to do action JavaScript, you're doing the pointing and clicking, but the reality is it's rendering it down into a set of JavaScript commands that will run on those devices. And the cool thing about that too is that, as you notice, the devices keep getting faster, the mobile web browsers and the web browsers on the desktop. So what's great is JavaScript as a language just keeps getting faster because all these big companies are duking it out. So once you'll need to know a little JavaScript, not much, but a little bit there. So let me go ahead and show you now that I've added to this button a click event, and I'm merely showing a action Java or a JavaScript action. So you click on there, and you'll notice I get a hello button or a hello message. That's a, for people who aren't JavaScript savvy, alert, etc. Okay, alert, and then let me go back and actually show it to you. We have alert, and then the text inside here is displayed in like a pop-up message, sort of a message box for people who are familiar with message boxes. Now, I don't want it to do that. What I want it to do is actually fill out a field in there. Now, I could go to the website, look up in Wikipedia, look up in the Alpha Wiki, but the neat thing about Alpha, especially in this area when you start getting into a little bit of coding that you may do, is that Alpha has a whole bunch of built-in capabilities. So if you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, we have insert placeholder, insert UX component method, edit JavaScript actions, and run those. But this is the one you're going to want to look at. It's called insert UX component method. And if I click on there, it basically brings up a library of all the pre-built little functions that are available to you to do everything you want. And those functions are searchable. First, the functions are listed. They have a description and example code. So this is awesome. When you're getting started, you can literally paste this code in there and make tweaks and get it to work. And again, you won't have to do a lot of JavaScript. We don't want I don't want to scare anybody off. Most of your stuff will be point and click, and there's built-in methods for doing that. But sometimes in certain situations, you want to take command and kind of dig into there. You have that ability, and you have these things here. So you'll notice I have a whole set of commands in here on the left. And I could say, let's say I wanted to refresh something. You can just start typing refresh, and you'll notice that it limits it down to the different things like refresh a list data, refresh a chart, refresh data series, etc. So you're given all these elements. But in this case, what we want to do is set a value of another control. So I type in set value, and you'll notice when I started to do that, it limited it to these subset of items. So we have dialog object set value value from, so i.e. take the value from one control and set it on another, and a few other little ones below there. But I noticed, that looks really familiar. And so on the right, it gives me a description here, and it's saying, well, what you're going to do is when you run this, you can set the value of a control with a whatever the name or whatever you want to. And you'll notice it gives you examples down here in the lower right-hand corner. So I can do one of two things. I can copy this example to the clipboard and paste it in, or I can just click the insert, and it basically inserts sort of the pattern or the method or function structure. So you'll notice that it puts in dummy information here. So let's go ahead and modify that. So I have dialog object.setValue. So I'm going to click in front of here and hit the space key, and you'll notice that even at this point, we're giving you hints on what you need to do. So I'm going to right-click on control name, and notice it's listing the different controls that are in my UX control. And remember, what we want to do is update that text box with some information. So I go, oh, right there, I want to set the value of text box. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go in there and click there. And, oh, there it is. Notice up here that it has taken, and in this area, it's replaced the dummy with single quote, text box, close quote. So it's actually just putting in there the name of the control. Now I'm in the value here, and I'm just going to go ahead and highlight this and say hello is the value. So there we go. So we now have made a little piece of action, a little JavaScript that will set the value of the text box to be hello. So I click Save. I then save this, go into my working preview, and I click Done, and notice what happened. Boom. It just ran that little piece of JavaScript and inserted the value, the hard-coded value, hello, into text box, into this control. And you can do that with any kind of controls. It's really cool. Now, I won't go through the full thing here, but in order to do what the Andy asked, what I would do here is I'd go var d is equal to date. That's a built-in JavaScript command. So what that does is take the current date and put it into D. And then you can do, and I won't show it here because it's a little bit more, you can then format that date and put that date into here. I'm going to do it. It may blow up. I wonder if it will translate it into text, but let's go ahead and do that, and let's give it a try. Usually you want to format that date before you inserting it into the desktop. They go like that. Yeah, it's not accepting that as an object. So what you would do is after this, you would then create var formatted date is equal to, and then you use some JavaScript command to make D, to do that, and then insert it in here. And then that uses the same thing. So what I want to really get by, and it's a great question, is that sometimes there's action JavaScript items for doing the big things like displaying maps or for doing things along those lines. Other times they're little small things, and in that case you're going to use our JavaScript commands, and the way you get access to that is through this button down below called Insert UX Component Method. And in here you have literally tons and tons of different things to control panels, to get the information, to click a button. That's another one that's kind of fun, is you can actually, with an action, you can actually tell it to go click another button on your user interface. So I've used that before in certain situations, etc. And then all you have to do at this point too is then the rest is kind of in JavaScript world, so you can learn JavaScript. And in terms of that, for people who are kind of new to this, what I would suggest is there's some great courses like on Udemy and some of these third-party training sites where literally in a couple hours you can learn all you need to know about the basic JavaScript commands, and that's all you're ever going to know. You don't need to know really sophisticated JavaScript behaviors, because often you're just doing simple things like getting the date, formatting it, and then using the alpha built-in commands to do the rest. So that's, I know that's long-winded and probably overkill for the question, but I wanted to let everybody know about what kind of facilities are in Alpha to help you kind of learn JavaScript and to do the kind of things you need when you do, and you won't need to use it a whole lot.
So at the risk of going into the weeds, I think what you need is, and I pasted this in, the toString function. So if it were date toString, maybe we can get it working.
Yeah, let me see. I'll just do that real quick. Let me see. Let's see if Smarty Pants are var d is equal to date. Okay, and then I'll go, let's try this. Okay. Dot toString.
Capital S for string. Because it's JavaScript and it cares.
JavaScript is very case sensitive. So that's part of the problem with JavaScript is it's got a lot of idiosyncrasies. It's very powerful. And there's a lot of people. The other is that, hey, when in doubt, if you're not super strong, there are a billion JavaScript programmers out there that you can hire to help you out doing these kind of things and take credit for it. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's see if that works real quick. It probably does because Dave's super smart.
I don't know about that, man.
I'm doing something.
Nothing. I'm doing something wrong.
I know.
You sorted that out. Going into the weeds. All right. Yeah. We do have a million other questions, so let me just pop back.
Move along.
Move it along. Let me just grab the little window here. Yeah, just a quick question about aligning things in a UX. For example, in the same example here, they've got their text box and they've got their done button, and they want to have the text box and the done button on the same line.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Well, let's show you what it looks like right now. You have text box and done.
Yeah.
And you'll notice text box has has a label, the actual text box, and done is on the different line. So now if we go back in, the easiest way to do that, you'll notice that this is your layout editor. In here you have little paragraph symbols that you might see in like Microsoft Word and stuff like that. So I'm going to go to the text box here, and I'm going to click up here to toggle the break. And you'll notice that the paragraph disappeared. So now what that means is don't put a line break after this control. And I can go in here and go into my working preview. Come on, wake up. Off in the La La Land. Usually doesn't take this long just to do that, but I must have hit a button. Probably a background process.
You know PRLCC running, do you?
Yeah, I hate that on Parallels. I don't know if anybody else. What is that, and why is it there, and why do I always have to kill it?
It's the clipboard that lets you copy between Windows and Mac. And actually, that does bring up a question. Someone said, hey, why is Dan using a Mac? I thought this was a Windows program. Do you want to just talk about that real quick and what your
Yeah, because I used to work at Apple, and yeah, no, I like Macs a lot. They're actually the best Windows machines I've ever used. The reason I use that is I do a lot of my video presentations and stuff using the Mac technology. And in order to achieve this, I use the system called Parallels. So if I go all the way to the top, I am using Parallels, which allows you to run a Windows virtual machine on my Mac. So what you're saying is when I'm swiping, I'm moving, this is the Mac world, and then when I swipe, I have full screen Parallels, and so now I'm in my Windows world. And it works really well. There's just a few idiosyncrasies, that PRLCC. Again, I don't understand why that's been around for years, and they still haven't fixed it.
Yep.
And just for people who don't know that, and you get into it, sometimes there's this process for Parallels that kicks off that literally takes 90% of your CPU bandwidth, and you have to kill it, and it's crazy. I just don't get it. So, but I really like it, and for two things. One is the Macs are really powerful. My normal machine is a MacBook Pro Retina. It's all solid state. It's super fast. Makes development really quick. But here's another reason why it's very valuable. And even on a Windows machine, you may want to investigate this, is that I actually have multiple virtual machines. And each of those virtual machines has a different environment. Specifically, I'm still supporting certain clients that are on V11, and they have everything set up. So instead of trying to mix and match everything inside one Windows machine, I literally create another Windows machine, have everything set up for that environment in that, sort of like the Mosquito and Amber, and therefore I can just launch that other virtual machine, work with what I want, and therefore I don't have to worry about, am I using the right version. So using virtual machines is super powerful and very handy from a developer standpoint because you can create distinct different environments for your different clients, and therefore you don't have to worry about, like, if you have to rev alpha for a new feature for one client, but the other client has no need for that, you can actually run both versions on a single machine. But I tend to like to set up a whole other virtual machine and then run it that way, because then I know I don't do something stupid to screw up someone's project. Okay. So I'm back to where I was. I've got text box. I removed that. Now if I go into my working preview, you'll notice in this case now the done button is aligned exactly next to the text box. And so that carriage return or line feed was removed, so now instead of having it on the next line, it's exactly where I want it, right next to there. So you can play with that. Now, since we've opened that door, I want to talk about one other thing too, which is containers. And I'm not going to go into that here. There's actually, if you go back about a month, I did a whole like 4-series thing on containers. And what containers are invisible components. And in the world of HTML, they're either paragraph or divs. And what you can do is put these invisible components and use them to fine-tune the structuring of your user interface. So bundling certain controls together and lining them up with other controls. And there's a lot of other cool tricks you can do with containers. So if you're interested, I would say go back and check out, it's about a month ago or so, we did a whole series on containers starting with, Container 101 up to the more sophisticated window containers. And that will tell you a lot of tricks and techniques on how to get your screen to lay out exactly how you want it.
Great. You had mentioned just a moment ago that you do use virtual machines and that you're supporting people who have used version 11. We actually have a version 11 question. And the question is, how do I convert my application from version 11 to Alpha Anywhere, which is Alpha 5 version 12?
It's really, you guys got a couple hours or so? What you do is you go File, Open, first, backup everything.
First make a copy, yeah.
And then put that backup on Dropbox, and then another one on Google Drive, and another one on there. Backup like religiously, because the last thing you want to do is go through a process and go rut-row. And you also want to back up your database and everything else. So I usually have a checklist I go through whenever I'm going to do a migration to make sure I've kind of archived and I have everything I need to do, and I've got that done. The next step is Alpha Anywhere is backwards compatible with V11. So what you should do is make a copy of your project and then open that project, and it will now work in Alpha Anywhere. So there's no major, huge kind of things you need to do to make it go from V11 to V12, which is Alpha Anywhere. The only thing you will find out of is once you've converted it, then there's so many new things in Alpha Anywhere that you'll go back and redo some of the interfaces and start taking advantage of all the cool capabilities in Alpha Anywhere that don't exist in the V11 version. But that's it. It's backwards compatible. I have not seen any real serious issues. There might be a couple little things you go across, but it's been very seamless for me to take people from V11 to V12.
Excellent. We have a bunch of questions, and I'm going to jump ahead to a question from someone who had asked questions in the past and we've never gotten to them. So out of fairness, we'll move ahead. This one has to do with creating a button menu. How do you create a button menu in Alpha Anywhere?
Oh, cool. Good idea. Neat. Okay. So since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. The way you do that is pretty tricky, or pretty cool. So I go into my panel card number 2, and I go down to my data controls, and I'm going to select checkbox. Okay. Now, it could either be checkbox or radio button. It's up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and do here, and I'm going to say checkbox. Okay. And I hope there's a couple of, you could actually use CSS great menus, but for now I'm just going to show you this kind of cool trick I found with checkbox, okay? So in that checkbox, I'm going to go ahead and go into my choices here, and I'm going to say item A, item B, item C, okay? So if I go ahead and save this and go into my working preview, you'll notice I have a pretty standard, very boring looking checkbox. But now I can go to this checkbox in here, and I can scroll down here, and it's got this really cool thing, render as button list. So let's go ahead and select that. Okay? Now I go to working preview and check out what it looks like. And this is vertical, but this could be horizontal. Actually, the reason that is let's go back here and let's set that to be vertical or vertical. And the other thing I want to do is get rid of the label. So we're going to go to label here. Just doing a little fine tuning. And check this out. Very simple. Boom. Item A, B, and C. And this is a checkbox. So if I click on item A, it actually enables the checkbox. And you can control that however you want to do that from that standpoint. Now, the really cool thing about this is that it's taking care of all the hover actions. It tightly groups this together. So if you go, you know what? Oh, man, I don't want that there. I want that checkbox, and I'm going to move this down into panel card number 3. And now I go in there. Now that whole menu is moved over here. Now, the other thing that's really cool about this is that if you'll notice, if I go back up here, I have a on-click event. And there's also on-select, but on-click is the one you want. And in here, I can put Action JavaScript to say, look at the value of the checkbox item clicked, then launch something or do whatever you want to do. So I find checkboxes, and this works the same way with radio button. You can do the same thing with a radio button, but in the case of a radio button, only one thing can be selected at a time. So it's almost like a very primitive, simple menu system that you can put in place, and then you use the on-click event. Now, you'll notice I have a selected image and an unselected image. You'll notice it's a checkbox, so I'm just going to go ahead here and get rid of that and click OK. Oh, I think I have to select an image name. So you can set it up so you can get rid of the checkbox. You can make that like a dot or a arrow or a whatever you want it to be and control it. But that's a quick and dirty way to create a menu using the checkbox control.
Great. All right, so another question for you, just a quick one, is the difference between the on-click and the click in the JavaScript properties?
Okay, good question. Let me go ahead and go to a button here. So you'll notice here that we have 2 sets of JavaScript, and a lot of them look a lot similar there. The idea, and remember, the top portion are behaviors associated with touch, mouse, and pointer events. The ones below are the historical ones, which are think of your desktop web kind of things. And so the reality is, if you put something in on-click, the system is smart enough to take like a finger touching a screen and interpret it as an on-click. But there's actually beneath the surface little subtle differences on the click event versus the on-click event. And that has to do with how mobile devices work. Specifically, when Apple really created the technology with the initial iPhone, it's really interesting too, and a little aside is last night on, I think it was Nova, they had a whole thing about mobile devices, and they showed the introduction of the iPhone from Steve Jobs. And it was just, what was really cool about this, and all of the developers will appreciate this, is that that was a miracle that that demo did not blow up in Steve Jobs' face. They were, the interesting story about it, and I apologize for taking your time, but it's fascinating. They had what was called the golden path, which meant Steve had to do a sequence of events in the exact same way perfectly, or else it would blow chunks and blow up on the stage, which would not be good. And so the developers were watching it, and they were watching the event, and as Steve did each portion, the developer who was responsible for that took a shot and then was done. Like, oh, I got it. It didn't blow up on my part. And so they had like, 20 developers in there, and each one would like breathe this big sigh of relief. And anybody who does a demo knows that feeling there. So it was really fascinating. But what's interesting about the touch panel on the iPhone and all subsequent devices is that you need to be able to distinguish between a person literally pressing the screen and a person that maybe puts their finger on it and then moves the screen. So like, for instance, there's a swipe gesture. So if I touch the screen on a button but then swipe instead of pressing down, the mobile device determines, oh, they want to swipe. They don't want to select this button. And these events up here, this JavaScript touch, mouse, and pointer events, are optimized to understand that. The ones down here are kind of old school and don't understand the newer behaviors. So I would stick with as much as possible as using the ones up here, especially for click events. That way the behavior works properly on the desktop mobile and also the, mobile and also the desktop web. But do realize I use a lot of like on key press and key down. So when I'm doing desktop web, like if the person hits the enter key, I can trap that in here. So you can mix and match them. But the reality is if you're doing mobile, stay up here. And even if you're doing desktop web, if you can use the click event, use it, because then it will probably be interpreted much cleaner when running on a tablet or a mobile device out in the field. So thank you for letting me go through my story. But again, anybody who's ever did a demo will appreciate the relief those guys had when Steve Jobs moved beyond their part of the overall demo. And luckily, nothing blew up, and it was, it was amazing what happened.
Great. Just back, since we do have a couple minutes, the example that you gave on the button menu is cool, but what about a button menu that like appears at the top, like in the header or in the footer? Can you sort of show what the layout is for doing that kind of thing? I think.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and I'm going to move my checkbox up here to my header. I'm going to hide this button. I don't need to see that one here. So as I talked about earlier, this is called a panel header. And so with my panel layout or panel navigator, the panel header will always be at the top of my screen. And so therefore, anything you always want to be at the top of the screen, you can do that. So you can put in a checkbox here. So in my working preview, you'll notice, and let's go back and make this a, I'm going to make this a horizontal since it uses the space nicer. And so notice, and it's cut off, but this should be the whole length of it. You'll notice I can set those the menu to be up here. And then when people select items or are inaccurate, it'll do there. Now, that's just a quick and dirty solution. Now, if you're going to get really fancy, what I would most likely do is render it as a CSS menu, and then in the CSS, put in links to Action JavaScript to actually trigger the event. And there's some really cool third-party tools. One in particular is called, let me see if I can bring it up here. And this takes a little bit more hand-holding. You have to kind of create the menu and then wire it up, but you get a much more native kind of situation. But there's this one tool in particular I'll go ahead and share with you. There's some free ones off the shelf called CSS Menu Builder, where you can actually go through and build this here. But let me go ahead and find this other one. Menu, bear with me. CSS Menu Maker. And they're at cssmenumaker.com. But what it is this is a software product you buy, and it allows you to actually create very cool menus that are all rendered with CSS and a little baby JavaScript. And if you look at the menu, then all you have to do is, and they have a nice little menu maker that will allow you to set the requirements of it. The trick in here is that what you need to do is build action JavaScripts using the JavaScript Actions Editor. And then once you have those in there, like let's say I build an action in Action JavaScript to say, go to a certain panel. Then once I have that, it gives me actually the Action JavaScript code. When I create my menu using this, when they click on that button, what it does, which is really slick, is it will just fire off that JavaScript, and then Alpha will take it from there and do all the behavior. So there's some hand-holding there, but I find if you want a really sexy, cool-looking menu that's very, because it's horizontal, it's jQuery, it's responsive, it's all built into it, you can create some really cool interfaces, especially for desktop web. So, you can't replicate this with our checkboxes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And again, when you click on these things, it looks beautiful and it handles. And again, this tool, this menu maker is really easy to use, and you can do it online or using other tools and things like that. There's actually CSS Menus 3. There's this one, and then there's also CSS Menu 3. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Bear with me, guys. There we go. There's also this one, which also has a different set of ones here. So this is like a downloaded product. You actually can get it for free to start out with, but it's limited in the templates you have. This one is online kind of scenario. But again, you'll notice that you can create very cool menus. And this is all CSS, so it renders super beautiful on mobile and web, desktop web. And it's very lightweight. The JavaScript, I think, on this thing, actually it does without JavaScript. It doesn't even need JavaScript, which is very powerful. It's responsive. It's really cool. And again, you can mimic it using just standard buttons and then style those buttons. But I find if you want something really sexy, I would look at using one of these tools. And then all you have to do is these tools give you just a little piece of HTML and a library to add your project. And then all you do is go in here and put in a static text. So I put in a static text, and then in the static text, I just paste in the code that you give there, and then it renders. It's really pretty simple to do, and it looks very, very cool. Your clients will really enjoy it because all of a sudden they have this cool, really nice, slick menu, and it's very lightweight.
Mm-hmm. And likewise, without all that fancy stuff, nothing will stop you from just putting in buttons like you did there.
Yeah, I mean, I know I don't.
Cruising down, you might
what
want
I
to put.
find,
Yep.
And what you can do in the buttons is you can actually go into the button class. So I can actually go into the CSS for this and modify that button to look a certain way.
Yeah, cool.
But if you want, the thing I see is, especially for desktop web, if you want drop-down menus and stuff like that, very hard to do in alpha versus just like a static button list. Like if I just go in here, then I have these buttons that I can select at the top, button 1, button 2, button 3, etc.
Great.
Okay.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you very much, Dion, for presenting. I'm going to take the list of questions that we didn't get to and send them over to you, Dion. We can pour through them for next week's session.
Excellent. Great questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andy.
I would also like to point out that you can go to videos.alphasoftware.com to get recordings of these sessions, but I have pasted a link in the chat window, which I think you'll find better because it points you directly to a category in our new video library, and you will find the recordings to the webinars there. So I'd like to thank everyone who attended, especially like to thank people who asked questions today. You can send any additional questions you may have to guides, that's GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. I hope to see you next week. Take care and have a great week. Thanks. Goodbye.